How are you?
I'm good, actually. Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me.
It's all right.
Um, yeah, it's exciting. Do you know, I'm not used to doing live. So as you know, like my first one on Instagram was like I don't know how many weeks ago. So this is like my second kind of live situation, which is exciting. And I wasn't sure how you were going to do it. So before we started, I was like, how do you go live on Instagram, on Facebook? Because I use Facebook, but not that much. So it was like, you know, I felt quite old having to like check how you go live on stuff.
So well,
stuff.
apparently I
But
don't know how to do it either. So you're
it was
absolutely
on you.
fine. I haven't got a clue. I'm still figuring it out. Well, dude, look, I thank you very much, and you did a great job, by the way, on your first. Like, it was a
Okay.
real. Let me give people context. I did this with Bethan last week. We just ended up kind of talking without giving a bit of context. So, obviously, I found a picture of you today
Did you?
in my phone. Remember, because you know I have the running crew backpackers.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you know the backpackers. Of
Yeah.
course, you know the running backpackers. But
Yeah.
you were in part inspiration for the backpackers,
Oh,
and I think you were kind of publicly the first person that I just talked to the concept about and talked to.
yeah.
And I've got a picture of where I asked to take a picture
Yeah.
in gym
Gym
box.
box. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got that. I literally found it straight. I should have put it on it, but I found it today. But so a bit of context. So obviously, alongside Charlie Dark, founder of Run Dem Crew, you and me met through the gym box collaboration that we were
Mm,
doing, which was the run clubs across Gymbox Old Street,
mm.
Bank, and I think Stratford at the time. And you came along, didn't you? Is that right? That's where we met, wasn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Um, which was wonderful. And I suppose about it, the reason that you were the inspiration to the backpackers is because there was a real mix of individuals within that group.
Mm,
Different
yeah.
levels, and it's not different levels, different mindsets on how to push yourself, basically. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? Like, and just
yeah.
different. It was a real great. We built a really great community. Um, and I always said to people, it was during that journey with those run clubs and coaching those run clubs that I started to really connect with the most powerful stories in the pack. Now, I'm not saying people at the front of the pack don't have a story,
Mm,
right? Like, that's not true at all. They absolutely do in equal measure. But I
yeah.
think that runners tend to focus on the people at the front, like,
Mm,
or people tend to focus on those guys. And I think
mm,
where we were running that pack and I was hanging out with you guys towards the back of the pack,
mm,
and started to talk to you and understand, you shared with me some personal stories of why you ran, and the challenges that you faced in doing
mm,
that. And I could see the real grit in your eyes every run that we went on,
yeah.
and it was just very clearly evident on some of our runs that the story that you were having internally for the last
Mm,
20 minutes of that run had nothing to do with the running.
yeah.
Right? It
Yeah.
had nothing to
Yeah.
do with the running at all. It had everything to do with the reason you ran. Like, the reason
Yeah.
that you were trying to move forward in life, the reason that you
Mm,
were investing in you, or whatever it may be. And I could see that conversation in your head as we ran,
yeah.
and we didn't have to talk for me to see it and feel it. And I think through that I started to really understand, if I may say this, and this isn't actually towards you, I'm just saying it in the right way.
Mm,
I started to hang out with some very strong women at the back of the pack,
mm,
right? Like, it
yeah.
wasn't, I never really found many dudes. I have in my career at run clubs, but you
Yeah.
don't. And here's the thing. It's not that men are stronger at the front. It's just a lot of men
Mm,
don't go to run clubs who think that they're going to be at the back because they don't want to be at the back.
yeah.
Does that make sense,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that the
Yeah.
men are up front or the women, because we had strong, we had women, there was women all up. It isn't about that,
Yeah.
right? It was about. Sorry,
Mm.
I know I'm waffling a little bit here. I just wanted to
No,
give it. So
it's
I
good.
think, I think it may, part of potentially our conversations today,
Mm,
and giving people things. But I think that was it. I met very strong women at the back of the pack, and
mm,
this grit that you guys had, and this strength of character, and this constantly putting, I could see you fighting yourselves, and I've been there, like it was me, like I was like, I can tell what you're fighting, I can feel what, and for me that was just such inspiration, meeting you guys and hanging out with you at the back of the pack. And it was like, I was like, this is not a dirty word, like this is where the real shit is going down today, like this is it. This is where people are facing their demons. They're not good at suffering, trying to force speed out at the front. Once again, nothing towards the people. But I was like, this is where the stories are right now. This is where the grit is happening. This is where the change is happening. And that for me was such a beautiful thing. And then I started to think about the marathon runners who are out on the road for 5, 6, 7 hours, and the grit that it takes to be out there. And through that, I wanted to tell the story and have a place more for people who are going through that journey at the back of the pack and celebrating that journey. And it was that inspiration that got me to kind of lead towards setting up the backpackers with Leanne and so forth. Anyway, I'm just sorry. It's a beautiful, it's not me talk. This is about you today. And I want to, Tea with Chev is not about me talking at you, but it was just such a wonderful memory and how we got here. So that's how we met. And then I was coaching. Do me a favor. So what was it like? Where were you at in your running journey? Because I know you asked me to support you and did some one-on-one coaching as well. Yeah. Can you give us a little bit of context as to kind of where you were in your journey and your memories of that time, if that's okay?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my relationship with running, what I've come to understand is quite a complex one. So. And I'm being quite open. I don't mind being open, but as you know, and I shared with you.
So and again, let everyone. I'm going to get to where you are in your journey later on, but you've got to. So go. It's like share. It's a safe place, dude.
I started running at a really, really young age. So my dad was in the military, and one of the ways that we started, like, just to bond together, was to run together. And I have quite a complex relationship with my dad. He's not in the military anymore. I don't have a relationship with him now. He's an alcoholic, so it kind of broke down. But that was my way of, and it ties into trauma down the line. But that was my way of building some form of relationship. So adapting to my dad's needs all of a sudden and being a runner. Anyway, that was when I was, maybe 14, 15. Then went to uni. Didn't really do that much running, got pneumonia anyway, so almost that I couldn't run anyway for ages because my lung was damaged. And then fast forward, before I met you guys, and this is where my relationship with running gets a little bit complicated, but I was dating a guy for a couple of months and it all fell apart. And then I decided to do the Brighton Marathon. So in January, the Brighton Marathon's in, and this was maybe 2013. Yeah, 2013. Anyway, decided I was going to do the marathon and had like 4 months or so to train. And just because, sometimes when you break up with people, things don't work out. You're like, oh, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So I did the marathon and it was, oh God, it was painful. Because in my head, I didn't really know how to run then. I just thought you just run distances. I didn't wear the right socks. So I damaged my toe. I cried the whole way, pretty much. It was very emotional, and thought, I'm never doing this again. I couldn't walk. I just didn't know how to run, like in a way that was healthy for your body. I just thought you just run distances, wore sports socks. It just was just ridiculous. Anyway, didn't run. Then I kind of took a bit of a break from running for a bit, and then I think it was. When was Jim? Was that 2016? I think early 2016 maybe, or 2015, something like that. Yeah. 2015 maybe.
Must have been 2015.
Yeah. Been following Charlie Dart for a while and Rundem Crew, but being quite introverted and shy, just the thought of being around loads of people just freaks me out. I just thought it's just loads of people here. I don't even think I can run that fast. All of this sort of stuff. And then the gym box thing came up, and that was round the corner from my new office. And by this point, I just started to think, I'm just going to show up as I am, and that's going to be good enough for me. So if I show up and I'm at the back, I'm fine with that. And it was the acceptance of I don't have to be at the front. I don't have to, trying to prove myself. Actually, if I'm at the back, I'm just showing up exactly how I am, and I accept that. So yeah, showed up at the back, and it was a smaller group than some of the bigger sort of random groups. So it felt very sort of safe. And that's an important thing, I think, with trauma as well, is you just feeling safe around people. And it was a way to kind of stretch myself as well, in terms of, okay, let's just meet with a group of people and just sort of, flex that muscle a little bit of being around people, feeling safe, seeing what feelings are coming up for me. And I think when you run, and what I find as well is, because I'm in my head a lot, it's taken me ages to actually get into my body. So actually like feel what's going on in my body, not just the logical, my logical brain, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. And so with running, it kind of gave me that. It kind of gave me that sort of, especially when it gets hard, like you said, the last 20 minutes, and you just think, oh my God, when is this going to fucking end? This, no, keep people talking. I can't talk about what I'm going to do at the weekend because I can't breathe, but I don't want to be rude, but I just can't breathe. But anyway, you keep going, but you're starting to feel things. I felt things like coming up. So it was a good way to actually, the beginnings of understanding what I might be sort of burying and what actually needs to come up. At the time, I wasn't connecting it too much. But it was a way where stuff was coming up because it was getting harder.
When did you start to have that, or did you go in knowing that was going to happen, hence why you did it? Or was it something that in hindsight, you're now looking back and you're aware of? Or at the time, was it coming to you like, oh, hold on a sec, this mind-body connection is something, very real, and it's bringing up things? Like, at what point was you aware? Because you're very aware, but at what point did you get aware of all of this?
I think initially I was aware that it was happening, but it wasn't really my sort of, it wasn't sort of in my intention. So I didn't really, when it happened, I wasn't thinking, oh, okay, I'm connecting with my body here. I didn't really have that sort of knowledge of mind body at that point. It's only when I sort of started to learn a bit more about trauma that I started to see that's what I was doing. But I knew that stuff was coming up, but I didn't have the phrases to say, oh, it's sort of a mind-body connection and I'm dropping into my body here, and that's why this is coming up. I just didn't know at that point what it was, but I knew it was bringing things up. And then it's,
forgive me, and this is a creative interruption as opposed to wanting to hear my own voice. And so how did you keep leaning into that, right? Like how did you keep, because what tends to, like, hey, like I can never leave my house again without my headphones, right? Like people are like, oh my God, like there's no way I'm doing a commute without my headphones because suddenly I have to listen to what's going on, right? Or like I can never go for a run again. I did it once without my headphones on and it was just horrible. It was boring, it was crap. Or I can't go to the gym, I just didn't get anything. Right, we build this relationship with this extrinsic distractions, right? Like these, and we have a time and place, and there's nothing wrong with them. But what tends to happen is that people have an experience of being left alone with their own thoughts, feelings, emotions, physiology, and whatever. And it happens once, and they don't ever want to go back to it again. I tried to meditate once. I didn't like the fact that the inbox came flooding, and I'm never going to do it again. What do you think kept you in that exploration, and what was your mantra or go-to kind of like cheering of yourself to keep exploring that?
It was and it has been and still is one step at a time. So it's one tiny baby step, and the other one, I've always been a huge Arnie fan, and he was a childhood hero of mine. And there's something that resonated with me when he was, what's his, he's got that film Pumping Iron, that's it.
Yeah.
And he talks about reps. And I started thinking the same it's like the same with emotions and leaning into it. It's sometimes when you first do it, it's like when you first go to the gym, you do weights, the run, it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes you don't want to be there. This is how I felt. It's just like, it just doesn't feel nice. But it's the repetitions, and it then actually leaning into those triggers and leaning into those uncomfortable emotions, and bigger comfortable, emotions, anger, rage, shame, guilt, are things that a lot of people sort of resonate with, but they're not nice. And I the way I see emotions now is that they're not good or bad. They just are. But it's exploring what those emotions mean for you and how they're coming up. And so like for a big one for me was anger. And actually I was a big people pleaser. I had this front of I have to be the nice girl. I can't be seen as bossy or assertive. I have to, be quiet. Basically, that's me. And ironically, it was like I was always comfortable being at the back. So backpackers was me sort of being at the back again, because that's where it felt safe. And that's the big thing with trauma. It's actually how you feel safe. And that's in your body, but also in your mind, that safety feeling of who you're around, what you're doing. But it's that small sort of baby steps, and it's, you can't go from, well, I felt like, when someone says, I want to be more confident, and they feel they're at confidence level 4, people need to go from 4 to 5, 5 to 6, not 4 to 10, and it's the same with anything you want to get better at, or you want to feel better at. It's this really small baby steps. So I think with running, it was always just take it one step at a time. If I need to slow down, go for, I can walk. If I want to, try and sprint. And that's the same how I feel for life. It's like when I need to slow down with things, I can slow down and feel them. If I want to sort of ramp it up, I can. If I want to just be at a sort of a content space where I'm just running and it feels comfortable. And I kind of use those sort of analogies of how it is for me in life, I guess. And especially with the past few years, when I retrained as a coach, and then 2017 was quite a bad year for me. Just everything kind of erupted, and eating became my way of my survival strategy, basically. And ate loads within the space of the year. And the doctor was like, you do know you've put on 5 stone in the space of 5 months. And I was like, yeah, and I knew it, but I was, in a weird way, I was okay with it, because it was keeping me sort of alive at that point. I was just like, whatever, this is it. And, I'm still here, and it's my way of surviving.
Can I, if I may, it's because there's so much wonderful stuff there. And I think one of the key things that I want to try and do with all of our conversations is think about some of the challenges that we know people face in this subject matter, and kind of really digging into it. And I think you always said this interesting thing, right? You said the wonderful thing, which is like emotions are neither good nor bad; they just are, right? They can. By the way, I love the Arnie reference. Funny enough, I've just bought. No, I've got his autobiography.
Oh, it's great.
Sitting downstairs.
I've read it twice.
It's my next read. It's sitting there waiting for me to read. Because everyone says it's just so great, and I was like, I need to get in it. But emotions are neither good nor bad; they just are. And I think a lot of people in the world of trying to make change and listening to the health and well-being space are told this, right? And it's like, cool, I get it, but my emotions feel very real right now, and I feel very driven by my emotions. I feel like I am my emotions right now. Like for someone who's potentially watching this, and in your experience, how did you create a relationship with your emotions where you got to be able to see them from a top-down view, as it were? Do you know what I mean? Like, was there any practical steps that you would take, or I'm sure you still take, because there's no way you're a machine and your emotions will get hold of you. I know they do. They still do with like emotions. That's the whole thing. What are the very real steps that you take within a day or a situation or a problem to start to have that kind of critical viewpoint that you need to manage your emotions, where they're not driving you, but you're in charge or in control of them, as it were?
Yeah. So it's a bit of a practice where I almost, and I guess this kind of ties into meditation a little bit, but I almost come out of myself and I say, what am I feeling right now? What's the emotion? So it might be anger, it might be sadness, and then where am I feeling it in the body? So sometimes, if my shoulders are like this, my jaw's clenched, my stomach might be gurgling. So sort of connecting actually what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking as well. So what are the thoughts behind that? And then it's just a case of sometimes if I feel quite agitated, I will sometimes, they talk about self-soothing quite a lot, where I just have to remind myself that I'm safe right now. So one of the things that I use is sometimes just like I'll just rub my heart, and I'll just say, everything's fine. It's fine to feel this way, and let's explore it, and then see where it might be spilling over. So if I'm feeling a certain way and someone else has triggered something, or what I would say is like I vomit on them. So I take it out on them, but actually it's nothing to do with them. It's something to do with me, and it's a bit of a practice to understand the self-awareness of, okay, what's the story behind this emotion at the moment? And sometimes it's an appropriate emotion to have, and sometimes it's something that's a bit more deep-rooted. And it's just sort of playing around with it. So it's just saying, what am I feeling? How am I feeling? What's the emotion? What's actually going on for me here? What is this about? And it's just building that self-awareness, and that's something I still have to do, daily.
And how do you what does your physical location look like? What is the actions that you're doing? Do you do this out on a walk? Do you sit and journal? Do you sit in a chair? Do you do it on your commutes in between? Like, when do you actually create the space to start going through this? And more importantly, how do you create the right state to have this conversation? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you get into the right mindset to be able to have this? What do you need to do to be able to have this conversation? What are the sights, sounds and smells, the environment, but more importantly, the physical, like, kind of setup for it, as it were?
Yeah. So in work, and this is what happens a lot, if I'm feeling like I'm in a sort of a state that I don't necessarily want to be in, and I can't really go out for a walk at that time, I will sometimes go to the toilet, and I will it's not always pleasant, but I'll go to the toilet because it's safe. No one's going to bother you and you're in the cubicle, and I'll just kind of take some breaths, and I'll breathe maybe for a couple of minutes, just breathe. And then again, it's just like, okay, I'm feeling like this now. And it is a case for me at the time to be like, I'm going to just breathe through this, recognize that I feel this way. I'm going to come back to this later. If I feel like it's something I can kind of grapple with, and I can sort of say, okay, I recognize this. I've now got to go into a meeting, so I just need to kind of bring my, awareness back to the room that I need to go into. Then I'll go into it, and then at nighttime, I will then revisit that. So it might be like, okay, what was going on for me there? And it might be just journaling of how I'm feeling and just allowing it to sort of free flow, and just dig into whatever that emotion is and the story behind that is. And also the situation that you're in that may have triggered that emotion for you, or just being able to actually do a bit of a deep dive if you feel safe to do it. And sometimes when I refer to like being safe, I think it's that feeling that I can cry loads if I want to, I can, if I need to be angry, and that sort of emotional release, being able to punch pillows, be able to write letters that, might just help you get these emotions out and actually help you understand, okay, just, so.
The wonderful Charles Oxley, who's my coaching idol. We'll hopefully have Charles on soon in the next few weeks. Charles said this very great sentence to me. He'll I'm sure he'll happily. He was going through a time when, just from an energy and focus point of view, was a few challenges for him, and he kept saying this thing to me. He kept saying this one thing to me, which is like, I'm okay with not being okay. Like, I would be like, we'd meet up, we'd catch up, and I'd be like, how are you? And he's like, meh, but I'm okay with not being okay. And it is phenomenally probably one of the most powerful sentences I think that has resonated with me in the last year, and something that I try and impart on everyone that I work with. You can get as zen as you want in life, and you can pick up as many. Let me just say, and like you, right? I've spent years focusing on getting from where I was to where I am. I live and breathe this literature, this conversation. Daily, I am focused on mindset and well-being and state control and energy, and daily I'm looking at the correlation between physiology and psychology. And I have been doing this daily for a long time now. So, I can't, and what I try and say by this is, like, I live and breathe it but I still let this shit get control of me. There's still days when I X, Y, like you can learn as much as you want. And even someone with an extra 20 years on me will say that there's good days and there's bad days. Anger comes up, ego jumps in, jealousy occurs. You know, there is going to always be these triggers in our life that are going to speak to our non-conscious experiences that are going to cause us to remember, you know, and start to, you said another thing, it's like the story I tell myself about my emotions, right? Like there's always going to be these triggers to start bringing up these stories again that we have. And it's helping people realize that like it will happen. I can't turn you into a, you know, you're never going to be turned into a machine, you know. We're not going to turn you into Arnie and Terminator. There's so many Arnie references we can get, but it's really important to understand that these feelings, it's like, you know, they're bad, you know, emotions will happen and they will occur, but be okay with not being okay. Be okay with being angry, being okay with being jealous, be okay with, you know, whatever it may be. So I just think it's such a wonderful thing to be able to say, like, you know, when you're sitting there in the evening, like, just whatever happens is being safe within that, being okay within that. Where did your learnings come from? What kind of sparked all of this for you? You know, if someone is trying to go on the same journey as you, Louise, I'm going to speak to where you are and where you're going, but if someone's on this journey and they kind of say, God, I kind of resonate with a lot of stuff here, where did you start? You know what I mean? Like, and what advice would you give to people that are kind of starting out on this road?
I think that for me, one of the most important things is starting to build self-awareness. And that's such a key foundation. So when I started to learn more about trauma, there's loads of thought leaders in the world at the moment talking about, you know, complex post-traumatic stress, which is really, really great. And there's one guy that I really liked, and he's called Franz Rupert, I think he's called. He's a professor. I think he's German. And he boils complex post-traumatic stress down to this, and this is a simplistic way of saying it, but it helped me. So whenever, especially as a child, you didn't feel protected or safe, you didn't feel wanted, or you didn't feel loved, that can then have a ripple effect. So he talks about the there and then and the here and now, and how the two can intertwine. So let's say I'm in my here and now, but there's something from my there and then that's triggering some emotions for me. So for me, a big one has been my relationship with men, and these feelings of, you know, feeling not very safe around them, not being very sure, being very cautious. A lot of that is my there and then showing up. So it's my sort of beliefs around men that I have work to do on. So it's like, do you know what? And then it's almost this sort of self-worth and self-love thing to say, okay, great. Like now I'm kind of a bit more aware of that. I can then go and look for the resources to help. So that might be a coach, it might be a therapist, to actually help guide you through that. And the other thing that he talks about, which really helps me a lot, was if you think of a pie chart, and then you've got three sections. So you've got the raw self, which is where the trauma is. Then you've got your survival self, which is where you're trying to survive, and the defense mechanisms that you've learned and the survival strategies. And then you've got your healthy self. So what we want to try and work with, especially as coaches, is to work with people who are in the healthy self, who are open to being curious, in a compassionate way, not judging decisions and things that they've made, just looking at what actually they're doing in their survival self. And the big thing that I learned about this for myself is actually sometimes the self-help and personal development world is a survival strategy of not dealing with trauma. So throughout a lot of my 20s, I spent loads of money on books, but it just wasn't really landing with me, because I wasn't really aware at that time that I had this trauma that I wasn't really dealing with. And it's the same can be said for religion. You know, people go to churches, and I found this, it's like because they want to be accepted and loved, but they're not able to accept and love themselves. And that trauma may have come from, you know, wherever that is for them. So it's really helping people sort of work with their survival strategies. And there is no good or bad. It's just working out, what are you getting from this? And is this healthy for you? And are you trying to just mask something that, you know, just hasn't been approached yet, but it's still showing up in your here and now. So that's the other thing for me about learning. So I love learning. I love reading stuff. I mean, I think my most valuable asset is my bookshelf, because I spend so much money on books. But there comes a point where it's like, okay, I have to stop and just let this content drop, but also get out of my head and into my body. And I think that's where, like, you know, there's a lot of breath work, yoga, dancing. And when someone said to me, oh, why don't you try Rainbow Rhythms? Did you ever used to watch Peep Show?
No.
Well, there's this episode where he goes to this like 5 rhythms classes, and it's always been my worst nightmare to like dance in front of people. Yeah. But it's just that sort of getting used to. But then what you're worried about is what people think of you, and why are you worried about that? Because of whatever that reason is. But it's just trying different stuff. Some things you're not going to like. Some things you might. It might be drawing. It might be just self-soothing. Breath work and yoga. Dude, all of those things.
I love it. And by the way, yeah, so we've got a question from someone. And guys, anyone else watching, if you've got questions, give us a shout. We'll make sure we get to them and cover them. I love it. From a coaching methodology point of view, whenever if I'm working with organizations or I'm working with individuals, it's kind of like, well, what's the first step to any sort of change, organizationally or individually? And awareness is the first. Like, you've got to know where you are. We all want to be like, we all want to be less stressed, or we all want to, feel better about, well, where are you today? Where are you right now? Where is your physiology right now? Where's your psychology sitting right now about the challenges and the problems or the pains and so forth? Like, learning more about where you are right now and having that awareness, because then you have a starting point. And then you can start to create a baseline, and then you can start to create the change that you need. So I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think what's a very powerful thing that you've talked about, which I want to loop back on, so I think it's relevant. Hopefully I can explain this in the right way. One of the most powerful things that you did or you do in your day was shift your state in the toilets, crack on with the day, and then loop back later on. Yeah. And I think this is really important, because what you've got within that moment is an awareness that your state, and for anyone who doesn't understand what I mean by state, I'm talking about your physiological and emotional state, right? Like this Emily Hightower, who I tagged you in an intrinsic way, talks about talks about a doctor therapist called David Seagull. Now, I'm starting to only fall down this rabbit hole, people, so bear with me, because it's still new to how I'm explaining this and working on it. So I'm still developing this into my stuff. But they talk about the brain like so, right? And he talks about within the brain, you've got kind of the mouse part of the mind, you've got the lizard part of the mind, right? Yeah. You've got the things responsible for, seeking out pleasure and distraction, and you've got the thing that's responsible for our fight, flight, or freeze, and looking out for us and managing danger in the world. Yeah. And what sits over that is our higher mind, our prefrontal cortex, right? And constantly what's happening through the day as we kind of tackle stresses and challenges is essentially we start to lose control of the mouse and the lizard, and we flip our lid. And once we flip our lid, our higher mind is no longer in control of what's going on, right? Like we lose access to and we go into these more automatic behaviors. And I don't talk about this a lot more, but what's a wonderful thing, and this is what people to realize, by you taking the moment out in your day, you're aware. You're suddenly aware that your state has changed, that you're losing grip on all those automatic behaviors that are going on underneath the hood, right? And then by what you're doing, by going in and doing breath work, is you're actually closing the lid back down so you can keep a conscious control of what's occurring, and you're not letting those automatic behaviors take over. And it's keeping you a little bit more in control of your day. And then as your day goes on in the evening, you're as you're keeping that, that's ensuring on the macro that you're keeping that lid down by then processing and so forth. So I think it's like, and this is, having that awareness, when you're starting to lose it and starting to go, and the reasons why, I think is such a powerful tool, But anyway, I just wanted to throw that, because I think it's and you got some wonderful... definitely. What was the name? Was it Franz Rupert, did you say?
Yeah, Franz Rupert. And Yeah, what I like about him is just that was kind of like my first sort of understanding, apart from, Gabor Mate, who's quite recognized now, and Bessel van der Kolk, who, both written really, really great books. It was kind of understanding trauma at its really basic level. And also stuff that blows my mind is how trauma can be carried in the uterus. So if a woman's carrying a baby, like
Tell me
that
more.
can actually, and I mean, I don't know too much about that, but he talks about how, say if a woman's pregnant, but she's in a situation where, let's say she doesn't want the baby, can't have the baby, there's a financial pressure, she's living with a partner where she doesn't feel safe. Those hormones can actually affect and like lay the foundations for trauma for the baby. And this is, Gabor Mate kind of talks about how people who manifest certain diseases, it's like actually looking at what was going on in that person's life around that time, where that could have manifested. And I have Crohn's disease, and I was diagnosed at 15, and I always felt like it was, and no one else in my family has it, but it came from a place of extreme stress and fear I had as a kid, because my dad it was domestic violence, and so you adapt as a kid that you need to do your body. And at the time that was, I felt like my body's way of kind of saying, like, you've been under a lot of stress and stuff. So it's interesting.
A very, and again, I'm taking this to a very simplistic response, because I think it's to help you, like, this correlation. Like, I think we think everything is in the head, and that's one of the biggest challenges we have. It's like having a debate with someone about the words mental fatigue the other day, because it's making everyone think that it's all in the head, but it's like physical and mental, mind and body are the same, and I think someone much smarter than me said, like, I think in the next 20 years we'll be looking at psychology as physiology and vice versa. And it's always like the body remembers. It always reminds me of my back problems. I had back problems through my late teens, early 20s. And then in my early mid 30s, like when I was running with you guys and coaching you, my back was just, even though I was the fittest I've ever been, my back was in a really bad way. And I went to go see a load of specialists again and again and again. The most common thing, like, everyone was like, you're fine, functionally you're fine, your body is just remembering the pain that it's been through for over a decade, and it's finding hard to let go. And that was like, for me, it was like, what? Like, it was such a power. I was like, how can that be? How can it just remember? And it was like, no, the body learns. It takes off, like, at a cellular level, like, what is going on is unbelievable. So no, I just think it's such a wonderful point to make with people, because I think then if we start to understand this correlation between the two, we can start to influence our psychology and feelings by understanding the how we can look after our bodies a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. There's a guy actually called William Bloom, who he talks about, and I went to one of his events a couple of months ago, and he talks about, like, he works with trauma the same way that I do, in terms of, like, when people are fairly healthy-ish and they want to explore it. But he was saying about trauma actually freezes. It's like frozen in different parts of the body. So sometimes when you're remembering it, like you said, like with your back issue, or like with me, I'm always like this, and I always have upper back problems. So it's like even building that awareness when I do that, where in different situations, what's happening. So if I go past a group of men, for example, I will sometimes do this, and I just don't want to be seen. I don't feel safe. So that's something where I'm like, okay, what's going on for me there? What's happening? And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna test something. It's like having experiments. I'm gonna experiment. I'm walking and actually being aware of my shoulders being back, what's going on in my body, what's going on in my mind. And if that comes again, let's practice and see what happens. Because I'm thinking, oh, what if they say something, blah blah blah, and it's just testing it.
And sorry, because this is great. This is really important. And what is your expectations of outcome? When you start testing stuff like that, what expectations do you put on yourself and what the outcome is? Like, does that make sense, right?
Yeah. So, interestingly, I learned a lot of this when I worked at a tech startup with testing, and there's no, you can have a hypothesis for the outcome, but it's not having a fixed sort of mindset to be like, if this happens, then it's all gone to shit and I can't do it anymore. It's like, if this happens, I'm going to do this as an experiment. And what I like about the word experiment is that let's just see what happens with the results. Okay, let's try something else. And it's like, there's no value based on the results of that. The results just are. And then you can go back to the experiment and say, you know, I might tweak this little bit. I might try this and see how that works. And then let's just see what the results happen. And again, as the scientist would, the results aren't, you know, there's no value. It doesn't change your value as a person. It's just, notice what you notice about what happens. And then it's like, okay, actually, that wasn't that bad. I might try that again, or I might try something else, or I might look into getting some help with this. And I think the other thing with trauma as well, and just with sense of self-worth, it's like, as you show up today, it is good enough. And I know Gabor Mate talks about that a lot. It's like, as you show up today, as you are, is good enough. And we've all done things that may not have been healthy for us, you know, indulged in behaviors that have served us in certain ways, but they were all serving us in a particular way. So for me, being in relationships with guys throughout my 20s where they weren't actually they weren't healthy, you know, these guys would not really stick around, you know, made mistakes. But then it was like, actually, what was I trying to get from those situations? Okay, I wanted some validation and love from a man, but actually I'm not giving that to myself. So let's work on that first. And then we can try experiments where, you know, dating, what happens, your boundaries get pushed, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the same with anything. It's like, what's your starting point, and then go from there.
And I think it's also, you know, I love all of that. And again, so much there. But I think that it's also wonderful just to remind people that, you know, in those moments when you're walking past dudes and there's that physical, you know, feeling going on, it's loving your body for having this protective mechanism. You know, it's like, it's looking after you, it's caring for you, it's trying to keep you safe. You know, it might just be a little bit too charged right now, and it needs to kind of learn to just take it a little, but it's just like a really protective, you know, it's like your overprotective brother, right? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or your overprotective, you know, whoever enough, like, you know, your dear friend who looks out for you probably a bit too close sometimes, but you still love them in your life and you appreciate them and you know it's coming from a good place. And I think, you know, whenever I'm in any situation where I'm feeling the story I'm telling myself, or the physical gremlins and, you know, that tightness or whatever, it's like, hold on, my body's just trying to give me the energy and focus to deal with this problem right now. I need to retrain it. I need to teach it. And I think what's interesting about that is then when you start to understand that you're in a state of education and learning, think about how you would teach a kid. And you wouldn't let a kid think it's either win or lose, right? Like, there's times in their life where you want to teach them about competition, but ultimately when it comes to learning, it's about, hey, you're going to learn, you're going to fall off the bike, but that's okay. Doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're not good enough to ever ride a bike. It just means, dude, we've got to get back on, and you just got to keep learning. And if you keep learning, you'll get there. And I think that's the important thing about outcomes with people. It's understanding, and I use A/B testing a lot. It's just you're constantly A/B testing in life. You know, it's like, right, I've got two choices here. I can either tense up and walk past and see what happens, or I can just try and open up and see what happens. And then it's like, okay, that time it kind of worked okay. All right, so next time I'm going to try and do this, and next time I'm going to do this, or I'm going to see what thoughts come into my head, and I'm going to spend some time thinking about them. And okay, now I'm going to go and pick up a book on this, and and I'm going to challenge myself and push myself. So I think that's great. Dude, I got just very quickly, not very quickly, we haven't got to go anywhere, but I just want to, before people have to potentially, because we've asked some questions here. So, the first question we've got, which fancily, look how, you can't see it, can you? I'm fancily bringing questions up on screen. I'm like, look, I've gone from tech failure, tech zero to tech hero right now. So I can't see who this is from, but it says, how can you learn to be self-aware? So I think we kind of covered some of it, but I think it would be really good. I think if you throw in an answer, and then I might kind of put something on top of that. And what are your thoughts? How can you learn to be self-aware? How would you answer that question, Lou?
So for me, it all comes down to questions, and it's asking yourself particular questions. So a lot of some of the questions I ask are some of them that are in the there and then. So this is where I talk about compassionate curiosity and getting to know your earlier self. So some of the questions I ask are things that I've got some written down here. You know, whose love did I crave the most as a child? Okay, you know, for me it was my dad. And then what did I have to, or who did I have to become to fit the needs of that? Other questions can be things like what I do. Actually, this is probably a bit easier to do. So I actually write down really quickly, I believe, and then I'll write things that I believe. So men are, women are, life is, money is, health is, love is, marriage is, age is, people are, holidays are, people are, and just write the first thoughts in your head. Whatever comes down, the first thing, then you can go over it and you can be like, oh, where's that word come from? Why did that come up? Is that true? Is that how I feel? And then it's just a way of thinking, okay, which one do I want to tackle first of what's come up on here? Which one doesn't feel very healthy for me? Which one feels like I need to explore this a bit, quicker. So just breaking that down. The other ways of doing it, I think that's a good way to see what your beliefs are. And then from there, you can then say, okay, this word has come up for, life is hard. Well, what does that mean? Why is it hard? What's happened? And sometimes writing your autobiography almost. So you don't need to write like a huge epic, but just write your story and just see what comes up in that story and connect with it. So it's like, what's been a struggle for you? What do you complain about? What comes up? Where do you find frustration? And just write these things down, and then you can whittle. You don't have to tackle everything at once, but it's like, okay, this is a recurring thing for me, and actually I need some help with that, whether that's with a book or with a coach or with a therapist. But it's just, and it's being compassionate about it. So it's not judging it. It's just, oh yeah, I noticed that about myself. I'm going to explore that a bit more. So that's where I would start.
Dude, I love
compassionate
it.
Curiosity. Compassionate curiosity.
Curiosity, I think, curiosity is a great, I think, when you bring the words humility and curiosity in, and you start to have these words as guiding principles to how you're going to approach your learning, I think is really important. And even sitting down originally and saying, like, what kind of learner do I want to be? You know what I mean? Like, what qualities do I want to shine through? How can I write a job description out for the person that I want to be? The learner I want to be, the self-educator I want to be, and then, how can I give that job or that person, that imaginary person, a title, a name? Steve is the learner that I want to be. Well, every time I'm learning and I'm struggling to figure things out, well, why don't you take a step back and ask what Steve would do? And you take yourself out of yourself for a moment. And I think it's, I actually, this is a big bit of voodoo I use with runners or anyone going through change. Runners, I'm like, what are the traits that you want to demonstrate as a runner? Who do you want to be? What if I waved a magic wand now? How would people describe you? And or what's the, someone that you look up to in the running world? What personality traits and values do you think? And they're like, they're kind to themselves. They probably know when to take things easy. And I'm like, okay, let's list them out. And then what's the name of that runner? Steve. And I'm like, okay, well, next time you're not knowing what to do and you need to be a little bit more aware or ask yourself questions, say, what would Steve do? Should I go for a run today or shouldn't I? Or should I rest more? Or should I get an early night's sleep? And if you're battling yourself to ask how you feel with the inside noise that's going on, just say, hey, what would Steve do today? Instantly. People are like, this is what Steve would do. So I think it's great.
I think role models, definitely, if it's something that you've created, or if there's someone you really resonate with, that could be a good role model. Like you said, go through that same thing of what kind of traits, what is it about that person that you like what, and then you can see where the gap is and where the blocks are once you've been able to go through that. And
I think that it's I think my point, there's so much, I think definitely with awareness is if you're wanting to know how to be more self-aware, I think sometimes if you're still struggling to listen to your body, start with just learning to listen to your body as opposed to listening to what's going on in your head. Because if you want to navigate the bigger problems in life, you kind of need access to the right physiology to do that. When our system is stressed and there's trauma in it and there's tightness in it and we're more fight, flight or freeze, we're more sympathetic, we are more prone to being more, kind of quick fire. Like if a lion ran in it right now, I'd be looking for the fastest solution to get out of here. I wouldn't creatively be looking at my life and the problems and where I stand in the world, or ask how the lion's feeling, or how much impact this is going to have on me further down the line. I'm just there in the moment. And I think that's what people need to realize is, like, when we start to focus on our physiology, we start to get access to more cognitive skill menus. We start to be able to access creativity, kind of more strategic thinking. You know, physiology dictates the type of psychology that you can get access to. So it's kind of, if you're struggling to like deal with these big questions, I'm like, stop trying to deal with the big questions if your body on a day-to-day basis is in a place of constant stress, because you're never going to really be able to answer them as effectively as you could do if you dealt with your physiology first. So start to be aware of not your mind, but your body, you know, and start to feel, am I rested today? Have I given it good nutrition? Am I hydrated enough? Like, how's my breathing? Am I constantly breathing out of my mouth? And if I am, and if I'm feeling tightness in my chest, that's a clear sign that my system is spending energy, it's stressed. So why don't I spend today thinking about what's the one small thing that I can do to put a little bit more energy in the tank for tomorrow? And then why don't I do that for the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? And then why don't I start to create space and time for my social brain to do the thinking it needs to do? So why don't I start to program a nice long walk on the weekend without headphones in, or going for walks at lunch without input? Because once I start to give my body time and that space, it will start to process. You know, if you're just jumping from one thing to another, your system is never going to get time to reset and process the thoughts that it needs to process. So I think that's the, you know, to tack on to what you've said. It's like if people kind of follow this now and follow this last 10 minutes and, you know, start to look at your physiology, start to give yourself time, then get yourself the notebook and go through a lot of the stuff that, you know, you've talked about, Lou. I think, guys, if you did all of this, you'd have a very clear system that could start to help you do some clear thinking. So, and that's great. We've got another question. I'm starting to get conscious of time. So we're going to, I'm make sure we give this one a lot of time. So I think we're both gonna have to think about this. I'm still thinking. I'm sitting here looking at this question, going, right, we're gonna ask it. I don't know which one of you's asked this, but we're gonna give it a go. So the question is, how do you know if your perception of where you are is actually where you are? Whichever one of you sods asked that out there, then I'm like, it's Friday afternoon, it's nearly the weekend, it's the end of the pot. No, I think go on, I'm interested to what. So how do you know if your perception of where you are is actually where you are?
So my initial thoughts that come up here, without being able to dive into the question a bit more, is actually, first of all, what is the perception of where you are right now? What does that look like? And then from what I'm taking from that question, it's almost like, are they looking for someone to say, or to see their blind spots to say, well, actually, maybe you're not where you think you are. So, and I don't know if that makes sense. That's why I have a coach, because my coach helps me see my blind spots that I can't see, because I can't always see them. I don't always have that awareness. So sometimes my coach helps me with that. And that's again, so that's what's initially coming up for me, is to write down what is my perception of myself, but also what particular area of perception are you looking at? Are you looking at your traits? Are you looking at, with coaching, we talk about the sort of wheel of life, which, is quite a recognized tool. It's like taking different areas of yourself and actually understanding what that means for you right now. Where are you with that right now? And then being able to take that outside of yourself to see, like, actually, am I aligned? Are my actions actually aligned with this, whatever that perception is? Yeah. So that's what's initially coming up for me. I don't know if that's what the person means, but that's sort of what's come to my head.
No, I get it. I hear it. I think it's definitely a challenging one. I think that you're right. Getting like an outside, and I'll talk about this actually. Getting an outside view and getting some perspective on it, I think is really great. I think it's really important to get people who live in neutral territory with you. Like, for talking to friends and family is a wonderful thing, but they all tend to be really biased and want to give you the story that suits them or suits you. Like, it not in a horrible way. And I don't want to disencourage anyone talking to friends, because that's absolute rubbish that you should do. But if you're really working on yourself, trying to get someone who is going to give you candor, someone who's really going to and you creating a space where you can have that, like creating a truth circle with someone you love or someone you respect, but outlining what that truth circle is. I need you to be honest, but then people are like, well, actually, if I'm not honest, does that make me dishonest? Well, okay, don't speak with honesty, speak with candor.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like, how can you create some rules and parameters to that where you guys can engage in this conversation and really challenge each other within it, and brainstorm whatever challenges you've got going on. So I think it's always important when you're getting an outside view to think of the framework of that, because if you just turn up and have a chat with your mum, which is great at times, but your mum is just ready to give you love and tell you you're great and you've got superhero powers and all this, versus, you know, actually, what do I need to hear right now? I need you to tell me, hi friend, I need you to tell me what's really going on. I need you to do this for me. But you also need to be receptive of that. You need to be aware that if you're asking to know where you are, the same way you can't be judgmental of yourself, you can't be judgmental of what other opinions people give you. Truth bomb. Like, you got to deal with it. I think
that's so true. I think that's the thing, is be mindful of who you're asking and why are you asking that question, and are you ready to hear something that may not be comfortable. And someone a coach said to me once, you know, for coaches aren't there to please you, coaches are there to serve you with insights. And sometimes you say to people stuff that they might not want to hear, and they'll be like, no, that's not, no, I don't like that. I don't. And then they'll come back because they have time to reflect, because they're like, actually, I noticed that I do that. And so it's actually then you saying, okay, I'm going to notice what I noticed when I do this. Actually, I'm going to see where this comes up. So like you said, it's like not being like that defensive and being like, no, I don't do that. But it's like, you asked. So be careful of who you ask and why you're asking, first of all, so that you can be okay with what comes back. And also things that come back, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It's just, oh yeah, I wonder why I do that. How does that serve me when I do that? Okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to test, again, goes back to the experiment. I'm going to try doing something different, a different behavior. And it's like a muscle. I'm going to practice that, see how it works for me. So yeah, just to build on what you said.
That's great. I think my final one on that, because I always try and skin, that's a lot of, I think there's some good things in there to think about. I think the final thing is I talk a lot about people about their inside view, you know, but actually, and our inside view is constantly telling us what we need. You know, like, oh, I should probably get back to the gym. I should probably start eating healthy. Like, I should probably call my mum, or I should probably, you know, like, it's constantly, you know, oh, I need a holiday. You know, you really need to go on holiday right now. Well, why is that? Because probably energy demands and the stress is quite high in your life right now. Like, our inside view is constantly trying to communicate with us, but that inside view is often numbed by inside noise, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is, you know, whoever asked this question, forgive me, I can't see names. I'm not calling you whoever. You know, I love you in this group. So the you know, where you are is where you are is your inside noise, but where are you could potentially be inside noise. Sorry, inside view is actually where you are, or where are you could be your inside noise getting in the way of that inside view. You know, and so what do I mean by this? Well, you know, God, I really need a drink. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going to have a drink. You know, it can be a great social tool to help us manage the stress of life. But if you're saying to yourself every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I really need a damn drink, and you're saying it in a way that's quite like, it's my salvation. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying that it's a drinking problem. I'm just saying that actually is that inside noise that is getting in the way of your inside view is what you really need to do some work on, how you're spending your energy throughout the day, your relationship with your manager, with your colleagues, your peer, like, you know, or do what you really need is a good early night, because your body's just saying, like, I can't handle the load of life right now. So potentially your inside noise is trying to distract you from what actually is going on. You know?
And I think that ties back to the survival strategy, where people they're not actually dealing with the actual issue. It's just something on top to sort of deal with that.
And this comes back to the flipping the lid, right? When our lid is flipped, that's when inside noise takes over, because the mouse is just looking for that instant gratification to distract us from life, right? Give me a drink, give me my phone, give me Netflix, give me social media, give me some drugs, give me whatever, give me food, give me. The mouse is just hunting the cheese, right? So what we can do is we can think, well, okay, I've had a really stressful day. Why don't I kind of close the lid? Why don't I go and just do kind of 5 minutes of breath work or go for a walk? And then why don't I ask myself again what I need to do tonight to deal with whatever needs to happen? So I think it's just always being aware of, like, is this inside noise? And actually, you know, should I be listening to my inside view, and what does that look like? Now, here's the thing, people. It doesn't take too much to actually figure these things out. our intrinsic skill to understand what we really need is phenomenal. You know, I say to anyone, I now work with people on a coaching period in a very short amount of time. So I'm like, you don't need me. You just don't need me, because you've got all the tools that you need, like, to keep exploring who you are. You just need to start trusting that and listening to that. And once you start to do that, God, the world's your oyster kind of thing. And then you're on the path of learning. So anyway, I hope that's given some things to think about.
That was really, and just quickly to tag on that,
Please.
is also using that to, and it ties back to the self-awareness one, is actually, and the inside voice that you're talking about, but it's how you talk to yourself as well. So I know that we often talk about like self-love and want to be loved, but how are you talking to yourself? And that's like probably a whole nother topic, but yeah, how do you talk to yourself? How do you talk about yourself? You know, this quote I heard is, complaints are often a doorway to unmet needs. So it's just understanding like where are these behaviors, and exploring what's actually going on underneath there to build that self-awareness, and that's how you kind of do it, I think.
We could do a whole other episode on this, but I think definitely how you talk to yourself is king. And I always say my final bit on that is, I'm just like, you know, would you talk to a kid like that? No. All right. Stop talking to yourself like it then.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing as well, I know this is again another topic, but inner child work, that's, you know, it's a big thing at the moment. And actually being able to connect with your inner child, there's lots of different ways to do that. But would you, and I have a picture of myself like just up on my board, and I think to myself, you know, how am I going to connect with her again? What did she need? Who do I need to show up to be the person that she didn't have growing up? And it's just connecting with her, what she needs. And also, like, all of this is being able to have fun as well. Be a bit silly, whatever it is, like rolling around in the grass, you know, just having fun, like finding ways to have fun, like be childlike, not childish. And I really love that phrase, just like be childlike in your approach. You know, I'm lucky I've got nieces so that I can, you know, play around with their hula hoops, you know, their Nerf guns and stuff. But you can still do that as adults, just to tap into that. You know, it doesn't always have to be super serious. You know, tap into what gives you, you know, sparks joy, but what gives you a bit of fun. And, you know, lightheartedness could be colouring, could be whatever it is. There's loads of things for you to try, and I'd say that as well.
I love it. Right, we've got one. We're going to do it. Have you got 5 minutes? You got a couple of minutes? Like, want to try? And if people have got questions, I'm going to answer them here and now. Otherwise, I'll just get lost in the ether. Right, final question, guys, and we're going to get this one done in the next few minutes. How can you love yourself when you are raised in a negative environment? So, because of time, we're going to try and give you kind of a few minutes answer this, but I also want to say, guys, that we respect that these are big subject matters, and I'm not here to give McDonald's like answers as well. So I just want to give some love and say that, like, it's really important. Like, these are big questions and important questions, and I can always get Lou back on again and we can talk and debate about these things. But Lou, what do you think? How can you love yourself when you are raised in a negative environment? And I'm going to think about this while you fire away. Off you go. So
I'm gonna fire away as quickly as I can, just because there's a time limit.
Too much, but go on.
There are three sort of stages to self-love. One is I'm not enough, and sometimes it boils down to that, and that's where a lot of us live in that stage. The next one is I've had enough, and that's usually when people say I've had enough of my own bullshit. And then the next one is I am enough. So you move through these stages. What's important is that you're there and then, in terms of the environment that you grew up in, is actually understanding, you know, there's a really good book, and I'd really recommend, it's called I Love Me.
Nice.
And it's by David Hamilton, and it's called The Science of Self-Love. And this is a really useful book with really useful tools that I think would really help this person. And he talks about, you know, looking at your environment growing up, and again, asking certain questions. So how was love displayed to you as a child? What is your experience of love? What is your relationship now with your parents or the caregivers or whoever it is that's negative? It's pinpointing what was negative, but also asking particular questions. You know, how did they praise you? How did they criticize you? What were their expectations to get love? So for some kids, it's you need to work this hard, and then I'll give you an hour of my time. You know, something like that. It could be as small as that. What are your parents' sort of self-worth? What's their like? How do they love themselves? What behaviors did you pick up? So just sort of being curious about, what is in that negative experience, and actually breaking down. You want to get moving to a point where it's like, I'm okay. again, like I mentioned earlier, is like I'm actually okay as I show up as I am today, and building up your self-worth like slowly. So you've got like, and I'm just looking here because I've got some notes, but you've got self-esteem, which is sort of what you think and feel and believe about ourselves. And then you've got your self-worth, which is I am lovable regardless. I'm valuable regardless. So sometimes when you grow up in a very negative experience, it's being able to create that for yourself. And this is where I do a lot of work with inner child work. So it's connecting with you as a child, your pure essence, letting her know, do you know what, it's, and it sounds cheesy, but it's like, do you know what, I'll just talk about myself. It's like, do you know what, it's okay. You're safe. I'm going to take care of you now. I'm going to give you that love that I didn't receive from my parents. For whatever the reason, the parents, didn't have the skills, or, I don't know the situation. But sometimes they talk about generational trauma, where did they learn that from their parents, and so on and so on. It's not to make excuses, but it's to understand what was going on for them. But ultimately, it's what's going on for you in the here and now. So I'd really recommend that book as a starting point. And there's inner child work, I think, that could be done just to connect. And also, sometimes if you might be feeling fucking angry, you might be feeling rageful at your parent, resentful. It is okay to feel that way. And sometimes I wrote down, I resent you because of this. I resent you. And it's not that, people talk about victim. You are allowed to feel the way you feel. It's valid. So just being able to, I resent you for this. If that's the feeling that you feel, then say, oh, I'm fucking angry that you did this. Excuse my language. But if swearing works for you, use it. But getting into that to be like, actually, I'm going to take care of myself now, and sometimes use a picture or use an image of you getting to your inner child to be like, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to build this love back up for you that you didn't receive, because I'm worth it. I deserve it. I'm worth it. You're worth it. I'm going to take care of you. So yeah, it's kind of there's a lot you can do, and I hope the book would be a good starting point for this person and inner child.
I think that's actually some really wonderful advice, and I think I'm going to add a word into this person's question, which is how can you learn? 2 words. How can you learn to love yourself when you are raised in a negative environment? Because that's the thing to understand, is this is a learning process. This is not a quick online course that you can take, right? Like, learning to love yourself is a double PhD. And that's the thing that's really important to understand. This is something that is going to take you a very long time to learn how to do. So then you've got to understand how to break it down into the modules. And those modules are going to be books, this podcast, it's going to be journaling, it's going to be potentially working with a coach, it's going to be conversations with friends. Like, you need to engage with all these different learning methods to figure out how to learn this skill, right? And it's going to be a skill that you're never going to truly refine. It's always going to be there with you. So you've got to think with that learner's mindset, that growth mindset, that long-term mindset when approaching this. And you've also then got to think about again, guys, and I'm going to keep coming back to this in this group, on this channel, in these conversations, is, well, okay, if the skill that we want to demonstrate is learning, we have to appreciate that we don't learn when we're stressed, right? Stress is the investment. The return on investment is when we're in a state of rest. We don't get stronger in the gym. We get stronger over the following days when we create the right optimal environment internally for our body to heal, right? The way that we process thoughts, feelings, and emotions is not during the day necessarily. It's when we think about them and categorize and go through it. But where we really process it into our non-conscious mind to create the stories that we tell is when we're asleep, right? So it's understanding that if we want to learn, we have to keep managing our physiology. We have to keep putting ourselves into a place of rest. We have to keep, focusing on keeping that lid down. We have to go for walks throughout the day, throughout the week. We've got to try and have to kind of close down the stress and energy cycles where possible. Like, we've got to look after our physiology. We've got to look after our sleep, our nutritions, our hydrations, our movements, and so forth. Because if we can regulate our state, then we start to get access to the cognitive resources to learn. Our memory improves, our ability to demonstrate creativity improves. And these are skills that you're going to need, or resources that you're going to need to figure out some of the hardest questions that you will ever have to face. So start with the physiology, and the physiology will start to give you the access to the learning tools that you need to figure out the tough old questions.
Yeah, and I think...
Go on, no, do, go,
sorry,
go,
I was just
go,
going to
go,
say another thing that's quite useful, especially with childhoods that were not healthy. Sometimes there's a grieving process when you didn't have the childhood, the way that you would have been optimal, and because parents are they have their issues as well, they're people as well, but there is a sort of sometimes a grieving, but sometimes underneath grief can be anger or rage. And sometimes it's being able to explore that and let that out and feel it and connect with it. And that's where it's like dropping down into the body. It took me a long time to do that. Because I was always in my head, like, oh, what's this? What's that? I need to think of the logical, academic route, but actually it's just feeling it. And I think that's where you say with your, physiology is, really important. So
amazing. Louise Howarth, thank you so much for doing this. I'm allowed to do this because I'm super proud of you, dude. Like, it's such
thank you.
Going back to the running at the beginning, it's people think that I'm not. I love the times, I love the PBs, I love the medals, I love all that, and there's a part to play. But what people don't realize is my passion for running and movement comes from what it unlocks. It starts to give people a blueprint to change. It starts to help them figure out the road ahead. It stops them looking over their shoulder so much and growing and developing, and it creates opportunity, and who knows where the road can take you. And that's the metaphor of the runner, of the journeyman, that I absolutely love. And it's when seeing you at the back of the pack and seeing you work through stuff, the reason I am proud of those moments is because I know those are the stepping stones to you being here right now in this conversation, being able to engage in a therapeutic, positive way to give people insights and to make sense of your pain and your struggle, to be able to help others to make the change in your life. It was because of those steps that you took. So the fact that you kept taking them, and you kept moving, and again, it's not, I know it isn't always 10 steps forward. I saw you in 2015, life was shit in 2017, and I'm sure that you'll have shit years ahead as well. We all will. But I'm just so proud of where you've come from and the work that you have put in. The conversation that you are putting in right now is because of the hours and weeks and months and years of self-development you've put in. And if there's one, if anyone has resonated with one sentence that you have said and think, oh, that makes sense, please realize the level it takes, the work that it takes to be able to communicate that. This is, and that's what I love, is the work that you've put into being here, and I'm so proud of you, dude. It's just so wonderful.
Thank you.
To see your journey, and
thank you.
God, what you're saying is it's really resonating through, and I think it's great. So we're definitely going to do this again. Because I know it's a big conversation with the group, and like I said, it's not necessarily something that I look at or talk about too much. So we'll definitely do this again. But for now, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. That's probably where I'm a bit more active. So it's Louise_Howarth_. And my website should be up in a couple of months. So that's super exciting. And hopefully I'll have a few more sort of online programs and stuff coming out sort of in the next few months as well. So amazing. Come find me, have a chat. Inboxes are open. So.
I know you're really open, and I know you're trying to be active. We got a small community in architects, and we're growing it, but I'm keeping it small. But I know that you're trying to engage with people. So if you're watching this and you have questions for Lou, please do reach out and ask. And I know that you're more than happy to advise and talk about it. And I'm even thinking of ideas of where actually you potentially do a chat with someone in the group or something, and record it and let people see and learn. So we'll talk. I've got some ideas there. But for now, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone else,
thank you so much.
Catch you next time. Take care.
Take care. Bye, Chef.
Bye.
Bye.